everyone. You're listening to the Aviation Reporter, your podcast about everything related to airports, airlines, and aviation industry. In this episode, in collaboration with MS Systems, we're going to have a great discussion with Jean-Luc Devisha. Let's give the floor to them.
Welcome to this next edition of the Aviation Reporter. Today we have with us John Swift of the specialist aviation consultancy Solus, who is coming to talk to us a bit more about the ATC world and how airports can better manage their relationships with the ATC providers in their local territories. So John, welcome, big welcome to us today. My very first question is always the same. Can you introduce yourself, your company, your function, a bit of your background for our audience?
Yeah, and thank you very much for having me here on your podcast, Jean-Luc. My name is John Swift. I'm one of the two partners and principal consultants, as you say, at Solus. In terms of background, my career started as an air traffic controller and worked operationally and in leadership roles in the UK and also out in the UAE, including I was about 20 years ago, I was the manager of air traffic control at Dubai as the airport was going through sort of a rapid expansion itself and of Emirates Airlines. So a really interesting time to be in that role. And for almost a decade now, I've been an independent consultant, working to help airports, air navigation service providers, regulators, and just to improve performance, deliver better services, and really find ways to adapt to a fast-changing world. But this year, along with my long-standing sort of collaboration partner, George Tosh, we established Solus as a business to formalize the services that we've been delivering for airports and ANSPs, and we do that through a toolkit of independent but interrelated modules that provide data, insight, and ultimately action to help airports improve their business and their operations and their services, and ultimately meet their objectives. And Solus has been set up to sort of provide a vehicle to take all our knowledge and put it into those modules that people can use and take advantage of going forward.
Cool. You explained that, of course, you also help airports in their dealings with air traffic control, the ANSPs. Now, in Europe, we only have a few countries where ATC services are liberalized. So how do you see the evolution, and what do you see as the key benefits of a fully liberalized ATC environment, as we see in the UK, where you have already several providers?
And yeah, it's a really interesting subject. I mean, from an airport perspective, often and traditionally, that air traffic services have been seen as a sort of a black box, and it's super complicated. It's fundamental to safety, but also fundamental to the efficient operation of the airport. But there's an air gap between the airport and the air traffic operation, and you talked about the liberalization context. If you're in a non-liberalized environment, often airports get what they get. The services provided possibly at a state level, possibly through some sort of semi-state, corporatized, or state-owned enterprise that gives the sort of the business processes, but it's still a largely a monopoly operation. And the airport just receive the service that's delivered. And we think that there's a sort of from the airport perspective, there's a limited insight into what's actually going on within air traffic services. So you mentioned liberalization, and I think that provides an opportunity to change the approach and to allow, as the customer, to have a greater say in the levels, quality, and types of service that they receive from their air navigation service provider. And you mentioned the UK, but there's been liberalization in the US, in the UK, in Spain, and also in the Scandinavia as well. So it's been a model that has been successfully used in many countries. Now, it's not the only model. There are different ways of maybe having relationships with your ANSP to make sure that they are properly aligned with your objectives and corporate goals as an airport. But liberalization or outsourcing and running a competition is one of the models that can be used, because it keeps everyone focused. If you provide that clarity on what it is you want, then it provides the opportunity for the airport to specify its needs, and then for multiple organizations to pitch to be able to deliver those services.
Right, thank you. You're a very kind of keen defender of having very clear KPIs between the airport and the ANSP. How do you see this, and how should the airport go about, or why should the airport really demand this to their NSP?
Well, one of the, I mentioned earlier that we have a number of interrelated modules that help people achieve the outcomes that they need. One of the first, going back to basics, one of those is our strategy module, and we normally look at what are the corporate objectives that the airport is trying to achieve, and then we will distill that down and translate that into operational level KPIs. I think in rolling back a bit, in the past, I mentioned there was this sort of black box approach where people didn't really understand what air traffic was and how it worked, and actually didn't know what levers they could pull. And then even in the liberalized context, we sort of transitioned into this provide a price for, it was very much input based. So provide a price for 25 controllers, 10 engineers, 10 assistants kind of thing. And that became quite sort of commodity driven. In the last number of years, we've been working with airports to help them provide the more of an output-based specification. And so the airport understands what it needs from its provider. It knows what the service that the outputs that service needs to deliver. Then it's up to the air traffic service provider to actually determine how best to deliver that service. And it also allows them, in terms of the liberalization context, provides opportunities for innovation, whether that be through technology or different ways of working, or the introduction of new systems. So all that then gives the competing companies the opportunity to deliver that output in whatever way they think it is best. Now, back to your point about the KPIs, you have to be able to measure these outputs. It's not like everyone promises to deliver, yes, we can do that, because it's all output. You need to have means of delivering that, and that's why we feel quite strongly around the need for effective KPIs. And when I say effective, we don't mean KPIs for KPI's sake. We have seen, measures of numbers of meetings held. We've seen measures of how many days it takes to get a monthly report delivered. I would challenge people and say that's meaningless. What we want is what are the KPIs that really define how the service is going? What are the things that people can zero in on and focus on and determine, actually, is this moving the dial? Are we achieving what we said we were going to do? And is that at a corporate level from an airport, is that helping them to deliver on their goals? And so, I agree with you when you said that we're focused on KPIs, but we're focused on proper KPIs, not KPIs just for the sake of it, so that people have a big list of boxes to tick.
Okay. Now, if you say KPIs, of course, you also speak about the importance of data, because it's the data that will make up for most of the KPIs. And this is, of course, also something that in the airport environment is always creating a lot of issues, data quality, data sharing.
Yes.
How do you see this? How do you see this flow? How do you see kind of these processes working together? Because a lot of data is used, a lot of data is available, but it's not always shared in the right way. So how can this be improved? What's
So
your
there's
feeling?
two aspects to this that in the past, again, this when I referenced that ATC being a black box and the airport doesn't understand or appreciate what goes on inside it, and then also they don't have the capability or the methodology even to measure how it's doing. So often what happened was there was reliance on the ANSP to, as we say, mark their own homework. So you were reliant on the ANSP who had the data to be able to be able to tell their customers how they were doing. So what's changed in recent times is there's other alternative sources of data that so that you can have an independent source, and whether that's through use of ADSB receivers and data analysis there, that could be the airport's own source, or they can go out to the market and they can get that data around. So you've got an independent source, and ultimately you've got a single point of truth. So that's one change. One of the other changes that we've addressed and sort of leads into your question was is data transparency. So in recent years, and a number of the service provision contracts that we've assisted airports to develop, we've put it up front, even in the requirements of the service. Not this isn't a down the line contractual thing. This is up front in the service requirements. It says we expect you to share the data with us to be able to either monitor performance or improve the services or identify opportunities to make change on a collective collaborative level. So those kind of things, the ability to get stuff independently to measure, and the fact that we're helping airports think about this kind of thing up front and put it into the requirements. I think we're getting things better aligned. One issue around with around KPIs, and I would sort of counsel anyone listening and trying to think about the KPIs that they are thinking of developing. I would also sort of suggest people don't just think about what they can measure today. And what I mean by that is there may be things that are important to track and to have as a KPI, because ultimately it's about improving the overall performance and tracking your route to where you're trying to get to. But just go, that's an important thing to measure, but we haven't got the capability. So an example might be emissions. So we really, really want that's important. If that's important to an organization and they want to measure it, but actually there isn't the ability to measure it today, don't just throw that out. Actually put it there as a KPI, because often some of these contracts that people are involved in, they're probably minimum 5 years. They might be 10 years down the line. And so just because the technology is not available today, in your negotiation phase and prior to contract signing, the capability may be there in 3 years' time and 5 years' time. And if it's there as a sort of a blank on your assessments, it's always going to be front and center in people's minds, and there is going to be a driver to say we must find a way to try and measure that. We put it on the list because it was important to us, and we still can't measure it. How do we fix that? So as I said, my counsel would be, just because you can't measure it today doesn't mean it's not worth measuring. Technology evolves, and having those KPIs in place just keeps the focus on what really matters.
Very cool. Now, of course, you have seen throughout the years a lot of changes with regards to the behavior and the relationship between airports and ANSPs. How do you see that trend evolving? Yeah, because like you said before, you have on one hand a lot of liberalized markets. On the other hand, you still have a lot of markets where the ANSP still has a monopoly. Um, How do you see this evolving, and how do you see the relationship between airports and ANSP evolve? Are there specific trends you see or you think might happen in the future?
I think that the experience of liberalization has sort of changed the relationship. I think when I started my career sort of 37 years ago, it was very much we're the air traffic organization, we do what we do. The airport, they're an airport, they do what they do. One thing I've seen is the mindset has shifted, and there's a greater focus on thinking of the airport as a customer. So what is the airport trying to achieve, and how do we as air traffic control organizations, how do we continue to do our core task around the safe and efficient movement of traffic, but how do we do it in a way that helps the airport achieve its aim? So that's one thing, and I think if we see greater liberalization, I think that's the obvious first benefit that comes. One of the things I see evolving is probably a greater integration between the airport operation and the air traffic operation. We've seen things like if some airports in Europe are, they look at having apron management services instead of ground movement controllers. So that's one piece where there's a blurring of the lines between what's the airport task and what's the air traffic services task. And again, having the air traffic teams understand the challenges that the airport teams are addressing through things like, it just stand planning, what's actually going on in the apron. And again, this is back to our conversation earlier about the sharing of data. But if the air traffic team understand what issues there may be around clashes between sort of adjacent stands, and they will understand the operation better, and they can take that into their planning. So I see a greater connection and a greater integration between the airport services and the air traffic services. And again, I mentioned at the top about going back to basics, the alignment of strategic objectives, the alignment of corporate objectives. It's making sure that what the airport's trying to achieve is translated down into the operational objectives that the air traffic service provider has.
Cool. So I like the fact that you bring in the apron manager, because that's a US principle now. It's something that has been there for a few years now. So you might see that shift then to the rest of the world.
I can see it. I mean, it's a number of the European airports have integrated or have implemented it at different levels, and I just think that it's where we will see probably a greater push towards that kind of the operation. And it naturally, again, there'd be an issue if it was an us and them thing. I think all we've done is create another barrier between two organizations. I think that there's greater opportunities for close cooperation, and whether that's, again, both teams working off the same data, having that single point of truth, both teams possibly maybe even working off the same systems, so that data can be shared between whether it's ground movement control, apron management, air traffic control, but that the data is passing between those organizations to allow them to do their job, to save us having to have a phone call or a conversation between operators.
Yeah, but it also makes sense because then you have on the airport operational side a much better view on everything that's happening, and you take control much faster already when the plane is still on the run and taxiway, and not when it's almost parking at the stand. So that's kind of a logic, let's say, next step. So no, great. No, well, perfect. Thank you so much, John. I found this a very interesting chat. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on the airport ATC/ANSP relationship. Very interesting. Love the fact that indeed everything should be ruled with KPIs. And of course, the data issue is critical and needs to be solved. And there are indeed other parties that can provide it, but having a very clear relationship between ANSP and airport is a critical first step, as you said. So now, cool. So thank you very much for your time today, and thank you very much for all our listeners to having listened to this podcast again. My thanks goes out to John Swift from Solus, the specialist aviation consultancy. Maybe one thing, John, if people want to get in touch with you, what should they, how should they get in touch with you?
They can find us on the website, which is solace-insight.com, and also on the usual. George and myself are also on LinkedIn, which is a good way to connect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day
Thank you.
to all of you, and see you or hear you at one of the other podcasts coming up. Thank you. Bye bye.